Well, hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another webinar episode in our myth busting series. So, tonight we are going to be doing some myth busting on health technology in wearables. And with me to talk about this topic is the lovely and brilliant Dr. Tracy Steady Hardcastle. Hello, how are you today?
I'm very well, Dr. Varden. I feel like I haven't seen you. I'm so excited to be hosting this with you tonight.
Oh, this is wonderful, and I love the colors. You're so bright and beautiful, and I'm a little bit more on the dark side, moving into fall here in the Northeast.
I'm hanging on as long as I can. So,
Perfect. Well, speaking of what we are wearing, we are going to be talking to you, diving a bit deeper into different types of wearables. Because honestly, I mean, I don't know about you, Dr. Steady, but I see so many ads and so many influencers and every biohacker and everything talking about, hey, what are you wearing for this? How are you, to optimize your sleep, your stress, fertility, wellness, whatever it happens to be. There's always the latest hype. There's always the latest gadget, all the toys and tools. And, you know, again, there's a lot of hype around it, or a lot of I would say misunderstanding about some of it, about what these wearables, what they actually do, what they can do, what they can't do, really leaning into those limitations, understanding, you know, what what are they about and how do we navigate, because boy, every device is always the best, right?
and the next version of the old one is always the best and all of those things. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I do want to say and preface that many of the devices, actually, the majority of the devices we are going to be talking about, and yes, we are going to be mentioning actual, specific devices that we do not have any, affiliation. We don't get anything with them. The only one that we do that is amazing, I actually have it myself, is BrainTap. We will talk about that as well. But let's start unpacking some of this. What our audience, excuse me, is going to take away from this conversation. So the first thing is we want you to be able to identify the hype, or I should say the overhyped claims when it comes to health tech and wearables. Also being able to evaluate, the strengths, the limitations that I had mentioned earlier. What can they actually do for you? But also to understand what does the current research say about how accurate these devices are and what kind of health benefits can you get out of them, and really applying that very critical lens when we are talking about AI driven health outputs, because we want to make sure that it's safe, that you have informed choices, and that why you are looking into these, because boy, I'll tell you, we've got some great marketing teams out there that grab our attention and make everything sound so wonderful. And boy, my pockets would be empty if I bought everything that I saw. So anyway, so before we dive into the first myth, um, I want to initially thank everyone for filling out our poll, because I know you filled it out. So I would like and ask Dr. Steady if she would do the honor of going through and reading the results of our poll.
Absolutely, Dr. Varden. Our first question is: do you currently use a wearable or health tracking device? And 63% say yes. Um, and 18% say no, not at all. And then, some more in the middle of occasionally, no, but I'm interested. Our second question was: if you wear a wearable, which one? And that was a single choice. And most people either wore the Aura Ring or other and needed to add it to the chat. 17% Apple Watch, 11% Fitbit, and 6% Garmin. Question 3, what's the main reason you use or would consider using a wearable? And most people, 42%, said to improve or track sleep specifically. 17% to track fitness or recovery. And then the rest were fairly evenly split around stress, health concerns, or for curiosity. And question number 4 is, how much do you trust the accuracy of wearable health data? And 34% say mostly, but I double check with another source. 33% say somewhat. 19% say I'm not sure what to believe. Only 12% say completely, I take it at face value. And 2% think not at all, I think it's hype. Question 5, what is your top priority when it comes to nutrition? Interesting. So 29% understand the science behind accuracy and limitations. 23% hear expert opinions on the future of health tech. I think it was, what's your top priority when it comes to the information in the webinar, not nutrition. I don't know how that ended up on my screen, but 18% get practical tips on using wearables without stress. 17% learn about genetics and personalized health insights. 11% learn which wearable data I can trust. And then 2% said other, and they're going to put that in the chat for us, Dr. Varden.
Well, I've been glancing over at the chat to see what kind of information people have been putting in there. And I'm seeing some device names that I'm not familiar with. So I'm not even sure how to pronounce a couple of these. Quican, Q-U-I-C-A-N. Not exactly sure what that is. Then there's the HDM 125. There's a couple people, they don't wear anything because they had some reactions or it didn't work out very well for them, which honestly, yes, that can happen. So another person has a Carbonox watch, and I appreciate the honesty for this. So someone says, personally, they're fascinated by the possibilities, but terrified after their first attempt at using them. So I understand. I definitely can understand. And maybe we can dive a little deeper and have a little bit of openness to see if that's something that you want to venture back into. There's someone else that says that that they don't use any of the sleep trackers, but they do use the BrainTap. So I hope that's been going well for you. And then let's see. So someone says they wear a lot of them. So they're doing Oura Ring, Ringcom, Circle, Samsung Ring, Google Watch. Oh, here's another one, Healy Watch. Yeah. So it's like the more as time goes on and as the hype gets more, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the hype is incorrect. Okay, this is where we have to have some of that discernment, and where we're going to dive into a couple of studies about the comparison of these sleep trackers. But it's really it's about getting the information, the data. Let's explore this. Let's see, what it's actually doing, if it's doing anything at all. And then, once there's some science behind it, once there's some information, and, you start having a cohort that's having good benefits, then it seems like everyone and their brother is making one. So, like I said, there's a lot more that I'm seeing here that I don't even recognize. But again, it's just amazing how much the field just blows up when we're talking about health and wellness. And actually, someone just put in that they got their Apollo Neuro for sleep, that Justin recommended it. Actually, speaking of Apollo Neuro, don't you have one?
I do. And I've been a little bit of a dabbler in this area for several years. And I've used Aura, I've used Whoop, I've used Apple Watch, all for sleep tracking. And in fact, at one point, I wore all three just to see what they would say that was different as I was phasing out one of them. And they all gave slightly different and interesting data to me that I felt like was more or less accurate at the time. Statistically speaking, I know which of them is most accurate for what, but just to see how I felt about my sleep and about therefore kind of myself when I woke up in the morning, based on what they said. So one of them, I think it was Whoop. I always had terrible sleep and my HRV was awful and I just felt like I'm so unhealthy. What's wrong with me? You know? And then the other ones, it didn't seem so bad, and then I had to remind myself that I'm comparing to myself, right? So everyone has a different baseline for things like HRV and their heart rate and things like that, and so looking for improvements or not improvements, compared to myself was the most important thing, not compared to my at the time, my stepson was a teenager, and his HRV was ridiculously high, and I it just really was shocking to me how low mine was. And I have to say, this is how we got here. The Apollo Neuro has actually made my HRV go up significantly and
Oh,
in a very pleasant way. It's gone up by, I think, like 25 points, which I mean, for me is significant because it doubled. Um,
wow, that's really good.
yeah.
I think
So
I think I might have to dabble. I do not have an Apollo Neuro, but I think between you and other people on our team are starting to convince me that I need to invest. I need to
sleep,
invest in one.
webinars, and planes are the three top oh, did I say webinars out loud? Those are the three top places that I use it because I really do feel like it helps me. I used to wear it kind of all day on different settings and things like that, and now I mostly just use it um, for nerves and things like that and for sleep. Because when I wake up in the night, it will automatically turn back on to kind of lull me back to sleep. So that
Wow,
I like that about it.
that sounds really nice.
It's also
And
interesting to note that the studies done on it were done in conjunction with various universities. So a lot of the studies that you see, even if they're on PubMed, you have to kind of look and see were they completely funded and run by the people in the company.
right.
Not that that means that it's completely invalid, but just that you have to kind of think about that when you're taking it into account. How did they design the study? Did they have a bias? Right?
Right.
Because they want it to work. I don't think that they have any evil plans or anything. It's just they really want to see their technology work and help people. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're assessing things.
Absolutely. And did you know that over 30% of US adults now use a wearable health device? Yet studies show that their accuracy varies widely across the metrics, like heart rate, sleep, calorie burn. I mean, that kind of makes you stop and go, wait a minute, do I want to lay down, 350 or $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever the case may be to be doing this, especially, when you're talking about look at the studies. This is one of the discerning things that you can do is that when you have wearables or when you're looking and do your research, do your homework, go to their site. Do they have science backing it up? Are there studies that they are, putting out there about their device? Look at who funded it, where was it done, what was their study layout, what were they looking for? These things are all very important for you to be able to discern whether or not that is a device that has some science behind it and not just someplace that's going to make your pocket a lot lighter.
And what do they do with your data?
Mm,
So, one of the things that I love about the DNA company, quite frankly, is how committed we are to privacy and not using people's data in ways that they don't know about. And that cannot be said of any of all companies that have ever asked you for to swab your cheek for something. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to name names, but that's something to keep in mind in terms of your wearables. Also, is what are they doing with your data, and take a look at that and make sure that it's yours, and that you can take it back from them, that they're not selling it, all of those things.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. I mean, as a scientist, I like to, give the data. I know how difficult it is sometimes to gather data, you know. So it's not saying that, allowing your data to be used for research purposes is an evil conspiratory type thing. No, but this is where, again, read up. What are they using it for? Who's it going to? How is this working? And make sure that you can rescind that that invitation to use your data if you so choose to at first allow them to use it. So there's a lot of things to look into because, again, it is yours. So let's dive into our first myth. So something we've already kind of danced around, that the accuracy of wearables. So a myth that sometimes people think or believe, or that's put out there, is that wearables are 100% accurate. Now, poke holes in that.
So so let's take sleep, for instance. Um, Most of the wearables are really pretty sensitive for sleep and wake. They can tell if you're asleep or if you're awake for the most part. Sometimes if I'm listening to a podcast, they think I'm asleep, and most of the time I'm not. But in terms of their ability to tell exactly which sleep stage you're in, um, that is more like 61 to 78% for some of them. For others, it's 50 to 86%. So just keep in mind, like, don't get too caught up in your sleep stages. You can use that to compare, once again, compare yourself to yourself. Don't be worried if it says you're not getting enough sleep. Without getting an official sleep study or something like that. But some of them are more accurate than others. But when it comes to sleep and wake, they're more accurate than other things. The calories burned during fitness activities, um, sometimes they tend to be more over. They tend to think that you're burning more than you are. And so I think that that really can be a problem when people are exercising and trying to monitor their calories, is if they think, I don't know what's happening. I'm gaining weight, but I'm doing all this exercise. And then it turns out that if your wearable is telling you you're burning 300 calories more than you are, then you can't do the right math to make the changes that you want to make. So that's just something to keep in mind. I just ignore that data. I like to measure my heart rate and how far I've gone and if I'm faster and things like that. But I just ignore the calorie data altogether. That's my my own uh, theory on how to manage it. So
Well, I will say that interesting that you bring that up as far as calories burned, because I know, okay, I have an Aura ring and I've had it for like 4 years. I just actually upgraded for a newer version. And one thing that I noticed is, like, when I take a shower, it says like hit exercise or like some major exercise. I'm like, all I did was take a shower. Just gotta, washing my hair. So again, take these things with a grain of salt to be able to correlate the information that you are getting, the data you are getting based on what you're actually doing. So, which brings me to kind of step out of the myths for just a minute, because I want to ask the question, why? Why are we interested in wearing wearables? Why do we wear wearables? Well, one of the things that we say a lot is track it, okay? Test, don't guess. And being able to test, well, in this case, it'd be tracking. Well, I know for me, and I know for my clients, and I'm sure for you too, Dr. Steady, that the reason why we wear these is because, one, well, curiosity, but really to see how are we doing, and then when we make changes, how is that being reflective? Is what I'm doing making any change? For example, okay, like I said, I wear an Aura ring. And so I got my baseline. I knew where I was for my sleep. And that's important because you have to know where you're starting. Wherever that is, you're starting somewhere. So one thing that I noticed is when I ate late, if I ate a meal late in the evening, my aura ring would show that my heart rate, my lowest resting heart rate would actually be very late in the night or into the morning instead of like midway or earlier in the evening. And my heart rate variability would drop significantly. I wouldn't get as much deep sleep, you know, different markers. And it's not that I just would, listen to that and go, oh, I'm putting all of my, how I'm going to run my day based on what my aura ring says. No, but I also checked in with myself and felt, oh yeah, I don't feel, as rested. I still feel a little full from the night before. I could feel the effects, but it was nice to see that objective data from something that I did, or drinking alcohol, the time of day, or drinking it at all affected different markers. So those are specific examples of why do we wear these? Because we want to track to see what we're doing, how that is changing the markers or whatever we are happening to be tracking. Is there anything in particular that you track for, or that you are interested in following, either with yourself or clients?
With myself, I also noticed if I overexercised, that my recovery wouldn't be as good. And then once I learned about my genetics, I realized that I was in fact overexercising and that my body did not like it. And I was creating inflammation and that was affecting my HRV and my sleep and all of those things. Also, if for me, my intermittent fasting window was sometimes too long or sometimes too short. And so, or my time controlled eating rather. So that was really helpful for me to be like, what's stressing me out? What's stressing out my system? And to see that things that I thought were good were not necessarily the best because of my genetics. And so knowing all of those things to get, I was tracking all of this stuff first and I couldn't figure it out. I'm reading all of these things saying, you know, you've got to really push yourself hard in order to make these kinds of gains, or you really need to only eat within this window in order to promote autophagy and all of these things. And it turned out that I was way overdoing some of those things. So people can use this for how does a sauna affect me? How does an ice plunge affect me? All of these little things that are sort of biohackery. Yeah. Those you can monitor, as well as, if someone's having trouble with sleep, they may think that they are sleeping more or less than they actually are. And granted, these things are not perfect, but if you think you're sleeping for 2 hours and it says you're sleeping for 6.5, that's a pretty big gap. And so it might be that the time that you're awake, or that you're waking up a lot, but you are in fact going back to sleep, and that's good to know. But if people's sleep changes due to an intervention that I recommend, then they can see it. And I think that that's really helpful also. So,
And speaking of genetics, being
like we
able
do.
to, absolutely, being able to tie in information from your DNA 360 reports. And if you don't have a DNA 360 report yet, we got you covered, because we've got a deal going on, which Vanny will put in the chat, because having this information is very empowering, because it can show you where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. So, for example, one of the reasons why I got an Oura ring, a sleep tracker, is because I was having some trouble, sleeping through the night. I wasn't sure why I was waking up tired. A lot of different things. Then looking at my genetic report, my clock gene is dysregulated. Okay. By the way, you will find that in your sleep report. If you do have your DNA 360, and the gene is called clock, CLOCK. And so genetically, I'm offset, which was interesting when I actually started wearing the Aura Ring, and it set and figures out like where your sleep time is, where the center of your sleep goes. That mine is typically off shifted a little bit, where I usually go to bed a little bit later and wake up um, a little after the sun. But anyway, that my genes were reflecting what was actually happening. But with other dysregulations, like my 5-HTT-LPR, I do tend to be more of that very light sleeper. So if there are sounds or the dog jumping on the bed, or if it's too warm, or if there's light and, my room is not completely dark, that will wake me up. Well, obviously, if my sleep is disrupted, I am not going to be having a good recovery. I'm not going to be able to have that rested feeling. So correlating issues that I have in my genes. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I need to have better sleep hygiene. I need to make sure my room is cool. I need to, make sure that I have some ambient noise to drown out any, mechanical noises or anything else. I need to make sure that the dogs stay, in their area and not be jumping on my bed, doing all these little things. Then I can take a look at my sleep data and I can go, okay, so when I've made these changes, how did it improve my data and how did I feel? How always check in with that subjective data as far as how do I feel? Do I feel rested? Do I have energy? Do I feel like I overexercised and I'm not recovering enough? Or have I given myself enough recovery? It really pulls in all of this information. But knowing your DNA and issues you may have that could be affecting your sleep if you're having bad sleep is just another piece of the puzzle. It gives you a beautiful informational blueprint that you can work off of, so that way you can focus in on what changes you could make that could make the difference.
Absolutely. And if it turns out that, that the report says your detox profile is such that you should not do too much of this type of exercise, there may be things that you can do. If you, let's say you signed up for a race that you really wanted to do, it's for a cause you believe in or something like that, and you really want to do it. One of the things that we help people with is figuring out, okay, how can you do that and without hurting yourself, in terms of inflammation and detoxification and things like that. So knowing the genetic piece, getting some help with it so that you can live the life that you want without having to suffer the consequences as much, or how to do the recovery piece. So I didn't know how to tune into myself. One of the reasons that I got the Whoop in the first place was because I just thought that I just needed to push myself hard no matter what was going on. I wake up tired, I, maybe have a little injury, but I have to just do it because that's the right thing to do. And I was like, maybe there's something to this whole recovery thing after all. And then after a while, I decided that I didn't necessarily agree with its assessment. Sometimes I felt like going for it, and it would be like, you should hold back today. Or it would say, you can really go for it. And I'd feel like, I'm really tired. I think I'm just going to take a walk. But what it did was force me to actually tune in and realize that it didn't have to be me working out at a 10 out of 10 every single time I worked out. So,
Yeah, I appreciate that insight. It really is being able to navigate, pivot, and make changes on what you are doing and how you do it, how you use these tools. And that's exactly what they are. Which brings me to the next myth, that AI health apps can replace your doctor. Well, when you consider in reality, AI driven health insights are not diagnostic tools. They are algorithms that are trained on limited databases, okay, and data sets. So it's really important that you don't hand over your health and have a device or devices tell you how you are and, diagnose, because they're not. Okay. You leave that to the person who went to school for 20 years and is doing their job and can better assess. So, can you give us any other information about how AI health apps, about the how people can lean into it too much, or what they have to be mindful of when it comes to this field? It seems like everything is AI now.
Well, AI can be really useful. So, for instance, in our gut test, there's so much data that having humans and it's coming in all the time. Having humans go through that would be so inefficient that we couldn't keep up in a way that would be meaningful. And so when it comes to kind of gathering information like that, AI is really great. But when it comes to um, seeing a person as an individual, as opposed to a number or something like that, it's not as great. Which is why if there are any women who have ever used a period tracking app out there in the audience tonight, um, you know that it's for some people, if they have regular cycles and they don't have any health issues and or anything like that, that it can be really accurate. For someone who has almost anything else going on, if you have PCOS or you're in perimenopause or even the stress or fertility of trying to get pregnant can also be a stress that can throw the cycle off because the cycle can be very sensitive. They're basing that on the averages of everybody whose data they're collecting, and it doesn't have anything to do with you yourself. Our Mira testing is very specific because it's testing your urine on the days that your practitioner has said that you should test it, and it's very specific to you and can actually be used for um, period prediction or for fertility, right? Using some of these apps is just not that specific. And a lot of these things are done that way. And so when you are giving your data to the companies, they're using that to try and help people to know what the average person's response to this set of inputs is. But everyone is different. And if we need to look no further than genetics to understand we are all individuals. Our genetics are like, as individuals, our fingerprints. And so, well, maybe not that individual. Anyway, um, no, it is. So it's really important to understand that a diagnosis needs to be made by someone who is taking more information in about you than AI can, and comparing you to yourself and looking at just you, not at you necessarily only compared to other people, right? The
Mhm.
comparison and things like standard of care and all of those things are useful guidelines. But at the end of the day, a practitioner is going to see you as a person and hear what your values are, what kinds of decisions you want to make,
Mhm.
what your preferences are, what your history is. AI can't take into consideration everything that you've been through when it's looking at your data. And it may be telling you you have, you should be doing this and this and this. It doesn't know you have sleep apnea, right? It doesn't know all of these things about you necessarily. So,
And, I do have to say the other thing that AI probably will never be able to do is have that emotional human connection of that, whether it's terrestrial visits, being in person or virtual, to be able to look into someone's eyes, to be able to hear, the tone, the desperation, or, you know, or the joy or whatever of that person. AI doesn't do that, at least not yet, and probably not for a while. But there still is something to be said about that human connection. So, yeah, let's not. For as much as Dr. Kosterman says that she can't wait to be a cyborg, um, let's not give everything or our agency over to AI. Keep some of that and also stay in touch with your own body. So, and I love how you so beautifully came to that relationship with yourself to be Dr. Steady, that you had mentioned about how using the wearables, doing these things actually made you even more in tuned because of your perception and the way that you took that information. I really, really like that. So let's move on to our third myth. And this time we're talking about specific kinds of products, FemTech products. Now, you've already opened that door, with some of these fertility trackers, with Mira. And so the myth being that FemTech products give women complete hormonal insight. I would love to have you bust that myth.
So I think what the question about is about things like apps versus something like Mira. Um, so an app, you're putting in yourself, your when you get your period, maybe things about your mood. If you if you do monitor your cervical mucus, you can put it in there. If you do monitor your basal body temperature, you can put it in there. You can put in when you're intimate. You can put in any symptoms that you have. But if you don't put in any of that, um, then you're just relying basically on the dates of your period for it to predict when you're going to get the next one. And if it's using temperature, a lot of things can affect the temperature of a ring or a watch. You forget to turn the heat down. Your partner's a little too close. You've got four animals sleeping on top of you. Your child wakes up, and that wakes you up, and that changes um, your basal body temperature. So all of these things that are relying on just data on your skin. Maybe you left your arm, you have a watch on and you left your arm outside of the covers all night. That's the only limb that was out there. And so it's feeling a little bit colder than the rest of you. These are all things. So it's less perfect than we would like it to be. Whereas something like Mira is using your urine and actually measuring the hormones in your urine, and so it's very accurate. It's like lab standard accurate. So that is something that is a lot easier to make strong claims about than something that's relying on things like temperature and your own input. And I'm not saying it's not worth doing, because if you're kind of having a bad day and you're like, this wouldn't have bothered me last week. What's going on? And you look at your little app and it says, oh, you're going to get your period in 2 days. Then you can kind of say, oh, okay, well, I guess it makes sense why that felt a lot worse to me today than it would have at a different time. Or I feel so amazing. So there's a point to it. And once again, it can help you to tune into yourself and record, make little observations about yourself. But I would not necessarily rely on it, especially not for if you're trying to use the biorhythms method of contraception. I wouldn't necessarily only rely on an app. I would be monitoring cervical position and mucus and some other things in order to try to avoid getting pregnant if that's your thing, not just an app. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, when it comes to this kind of technology, it's a matter of being careful about that over-promising, because if they overpromise, that can lead to that false reassurance, or even anxiety about what's going on. So have realistic expectations about the data being collected. What are you using it for? And this is where doing your homework and knowing what these devices actually do, what do they measure, and what are their limitations? And then setting up your own expectations around that. So that way you aren't falling into having, anxiety or misinformation. I will say, some of this tech, though, I mean, can be very useful, like you were saying, oh, a couple days, it's like you didn't have a whole lot of energy, or you were a bit more moody, and oh, going to start in a couple days, or, oh, I've got a lot of energy, because you happen to be a little bit earlier in your cycle or mid-cycle. This can also be useful in conjunction with your DNA 360, especially looking at your hormone profile. If you are a female who is still cycling, and where your cycles are, and a little bit more specific, you can actually hone in for your fitness, because depending on your particular type of hormone profile and cardiovascular profile, which obviously is very important, for health, longevity, but you want to marry the two so that way that you are working out to enhance what your genes have set you up for. So if you are doing, if your hormone profile is like 70% weight bearing resistance training and 30% cardiovascular, what have you, then knowing what to do and when to push during your cycle. And if you know your cycle, then you can kind of use that as a tool to give you information, so that way you can get the most out of your workout. So you're not over working out. So you're giving your body time for the recovery, okay, based on your detox pathways in the anti-inflammatory section of your DNA 360 report, to see how well do I detoxify these reactive oxygen species that end up building up after a hard workout, or to give me the time of recovery. Do I need to take a couple days after hard recovery, or am I good with just one day? So it really can empower you with that knowledge. So moving on to our next myth. Myth number 4, more data equals better health. Why? Now let's think about that. So we say, test, don't guess. As a scientist, and I love data, I really do. So why would more data not necessarily equal better health?
Well, if you're asking me, which I
am
think you
asking.
might be, I think it depends what the data is and how actionable it is, right? So for instance, we say test, don't guess because all of our testing, there's data that you can actually do something about it. We're not testing things and then reporting them to people and it's just out there and they can't do anything about it, right? So um, too much data from wearables and things like that, they can contradict one another. It can be overwhelming. It can make you feel like a failure. Like I was freaking out about my HRV, you know what I mean? And it's just how I was built, right? Probably my whole family, if any of them were testing it, which they're not, would have been similar, right? So it's if it affects people emotionally, which some profiles in the mood and behavior section of our report might end up thinking about it for longer than others. BDNF people, you know who you are. If you don't, then get out your report or check our app. If you don't, the app is really quick and easy way to just scroll through all the different reports, and you can just do it right on your phone. For some people it might be really anxiety producing, and I think so there's a comment in the chat from Cheryl, and she says that one of the things she really likes about the Apple Watch is that she gets heart palpitations, and she likes it, because of the fall protection and for safety, but she doesn't really care about some of the other things like sleep. Meh. She doesn't really care about that, but she does like the step tracking because it spurs her to keep active. And so picking and choosing the things that you want to pay attention to versus the things that you don't want to pay attention to, I think is really important, being discerning so that you're not, if she were paying more attention to the sleep, but there was nothing she could do about it, then what's the point of that, right? If you're not actively trying to do something to change it or doing some kind of intervention around it, then unless something really changes, like for instance, if you have a fever, some of these wearables are going to say, your temperature was way out of bounds. Are you getting sick? And that it might detect that before you even actually feel sick. That happened to me once. I was like, I'm fine. And by the end of the day, I was like, you were right.
That happened to
How
me
did
too.
you know? Are you psychic? Oh no, you were monitoring my temperature. So, so that's, sometimes things like that, if it's way out of bounds for you, you can kind of check in with yourself and be like, that was weird. What was that about?
Yeah. And, this brings up a good question. And I would love to ask our audience. I would like to have you put a one in the chat if any of the wearables that you've ever used gave you anxiety. Throw a one in the chat. By the way, I'd throw a one in the
I was
chat.
going to say, can I throw one in the chat? Am I allowed to do that?
Several ones in the chat. If your devices or if a wearable that you have used or that you have has given you anxiety, or multiple devices, or if you've gotten anxiety in dealing with this, throw a one in the chat. Look at that. Look at all those ones. Yes. See, absolutely. Thank you for being vulnerable and putting that out there, because yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're absolutely right. So if you said too much monitoring is why I paused it. This is where that information overload, it's like decision paralysis. It's information paralysis. It can be overwhelming. And I will say, because of my 5-HTTLPR and other aspects of my mood and behavior, I pay attention to detail, can get overwhelmed, can, have a lot of things going on. I love the data, but sometimes it can feel like, oh, too much. It's like, okay, hold on. So I have had to learn how to manage incoming information. How do I want to organize it? How do I want to use that? And this is where I am so happy how you had brought up and pulled out from the chat, I think it was Cheryl, about why she uses her tracker. She doesn't need it for sleep. She has a very specific reason. And this is what we were talking about. Know why you are getting something. So that way you're not just, spending a lot of money, that you actually have a purpose, what you're going to use it for, how you're going to use it, and then what you are going to do as far as making changes and then tracking. So I really appreciate all the information that you guys have given, some other great stuff here. Cynthia's saying that after her mycotoxin poisoning, heart rate variability change scared her. Yeah, I can see why, but I'll tell you that that is something almost like a little bit of a wake-up call, realizing how toxic exposures can affect you in a negative way, and knowing that to start making the changes. Yeah, you probably might have a headache or have other symptoms, but to actually see that objective data, those changes, in that way, yeah, that cause for anxiety, that scare, can put you in motion to make the changes necessary to help yourself heal. Let's talk about a couple other device types. So we've talked a lot about sleep trackers, and the fact that there are a lot of them, that you've already dove into some of the statistics about them and accuracy, but what about some of the others? So we also talked about fertility, but let's jump into one that I had mentioned from the very beginning, BrainTap. We mentioned the Apollo Neuro. Okay, so what about some of these other devices? Because it's not necessarily that they track per se, because the BrainTap isn't tracking anything. The Apollo Neuro isn't tracking, but it is a device that is providing something that has a health benefit that the trackers could pick up.
Right. It's the intervention that you want to see the effect of in your trackers, right? Both of those things. And I think that you can speak. I've not tried BrainTap yet, but you have, and I've tried Apollo. So together,
Yes.
combined, we have tried them both. So yeah, the Apollo is has different vibrational settings. Some can bring focus or for studying, and some are more calm and are more for recovery. The way that I am wired, thanks to my genetics, um, I mostly just need to calm down all the time. That's really I I'm always focusing. I respond to stress strongly. I don't clear any of those out of my system. So I pretty much just always need to calm down. So I mostly just use the ones for calm. But for some people who are not built like me, some of the ones that are about waking up. Some people have a hard time waking up in the morning, or they need to focus, or they need a little bit more joy. They have all of these different, they're called vibes that you can use, and it vibrates slightly differently and you can wear it on your wrist, you can wear it on your leg. I think that there's a clip that you can clip it to your shirt too, but that felt awkward to me, so I don't use that much, but it does come with one, I think. So those are all of the ways that you can use it. So now, how about BrainTap, Dr. Varden?
Well, BrainTap, I have to say, I really like it. I ended up getting it at a conference that I had gone to, and flying around and everything else. I've told this story before, but it really hit home to go, oh my gosh, this works. And I really like it, and I recommend it to a lot of clients. So BrainTap is a headset that, well, it's earphones, and then you bring the visor down, because the visor will give some pulsing lights. You keep your eyes closed, by the way. So usually you're in a relaxed sitting or lying down, and it will give you music, or it will have pre-recorded stories, or voices for whatever. I mean, there are so many different settings, so many different things that you could use it for: PTSD, relaxation, better sleep, more deep sleep, focus, learning, you name it, it's in there. And works with an app. So what ended up happening is I had purchased the unit, and I ended up flying from Florida, where the conference was, and I was going to Arizona, and I had a layover in Austin, Texas. And I ended up missing my flight, and I ended up being at the airport for 9 hours. 9 hours, ouch, yes. And with my particular genetic profile, I do tend to get overwhelmed, which I've already shared. And with all of the noises, the electronics, the sounds, and plus traveling, I was exhausted. And it was just the overwhelm, the fatigue. And then I remembered, oh, I have my BrainTap, because one of the things that Patrick Porter had talked about when he was on stage was during travel and realigning the brain, and getting all these wonderful benefits. So I said, you know what, I'm going to try this. So found a little spot at the gate, and I ended up doing 2 sessions back to back, like about 20 minutes each. When I took that unit off, I was just like, oh wow, my headache is gone. I feel better. I felt more clear. I didn't have the fatigue. I was like, holy crap, this is really cool. I mean, I knew theoretically, I knew the science behind it, I knew all that, but to actually feel it, to actually have that, I was just like, wow, this is amazing. So I'll use it in the morning, I'll use it in the evening. I've had friends who have out of military service with PTSD do actually, after the first session of a PTSD session, he was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. He said, I got to tell my buddies about this, because for the first time he was just able to calm. His brain was more quiet. Really just an amazing device. But again, it's not that it tracks anything. This is something that yes, Norma asked, can this device be used by children and adults? Absolutely. They actually have sessions just for children. So absolutely they can use it. And if you have sensitivities with flashing lights, you can just put the visor up and just have the sound. So, definitely take a look. We have a link there and a discount code for DNA 360 for 15% off the power bundle. And it's not like I'm sitting here, being a commercial for them. It's saying, hey, there are devices. There is science behind it. There are things that you can try, and if you get benefits out of it, well, then heck, isn't that what the bottom line is? Is to get the benefits. So let's see. We are at top of the hour, and you have a comment to make.
I do, which is just that I just had seen a couple of things in the chat about CGMs,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
continuous glucose monitors are pretty well validated for accuracy, but they are not perfect. Once again, they can be used safely by diabetics for monitoring. Even insulin dependent diabetics can use them. So they are pretty accurate. Sometimes when compared to blood, you can see a little bit of discrepancy, but the point is that it's going to tell you if you're out of range for you. So if you go too low, you're going to get an alarm. If you go too high, you're going to get an alarm. If it's dangerously low, you'll get an alarm. So sometimes, especially with insulin dependent diabetics, I have some in my family. Um, the going low is just as scary, if not scarier, than when they go too high. So that can really help, so that they don't have to wake up on their own, for instance. So that can be really good. And
Well,
then
keeping track of blood glucose, especially during sleep, can be very informative, because if you're waking up in the middle of the night and you have no idea why. Now, granted, say you're not a diabetic, okay? So that it's not like a medically necessary device, okay? But as say a biohacker wanting to know, I've actually had clients who, yeah, I actually have mine on too.
that's
Um,
funny.
that they'd be waking up in the middle of the night, and we've tried different things, and weren't really sure, and so they ended up getting a continuous glucose monitor, because their blood sugar was a squeak high, not in diabetic range, but a little bit higher than we would have liked. But they ended up finding out that they were going hypoglycemic at night and waking up. So we tweaked, set up to have them have a very small snack before they went to bed, not so much where it would disrupt their deep sleep, but enough to give their brain the energy it needed to get through the night and not have them wake up. And that's what happened. And it was just like, oh, fantastic. So again, absolutely, this kind of information can be definitely helpful, even when you start pairing them, like we were saying, the continuous glucose monitor and a sleep tracker, you know being able to do that, is wonderful. So, and it's not, as a biohacker, you don't necessarily have to wear the continuous glucose monitor forevermore. You can just wear it for a certain period of time to gather the data on what foods spike you, how you eat, or the time or the order of the food that you eat, and how that affects your blood glucose, so you can better personalize the foods that you're eating, what you're doing, and using your DNA 360 to help inform that, for the nutrients that you need, or for the types of foods, whether you're not so good at breaking down carbohydrates and that's making you gain weight and you're trying to figure this out and your blood sugar is spiking. Well, we can start removing some of those things, shifting in other foods, and then you've got a continuous glucose monitor to follow to see how you're doing. You've got, a sleep tracker. You've got some of these other wearables, again, to follow to see how these actionable items are actually working for you. And really, that's what it comes down to. When you are navigating the hype, when you are trying to figure out, with the plethora of wearables, of technologies that are out there are certain things that you want to remember and be mindful of. You want to make sure, number one, that no matter what you have, whatever you are using, that you treat that data as directional, not diagnostic. Okay. Make sure that you have a realistic expectation and understanding that wearables are tools. So use them appropriately. Also consider privacy and who owns your data. Okay. How you want that to be worked. Because if there's a company that you don't like, that they're going to sell your data, or that you can't rescind if you said, yes, you can have it, don't go with that company. I'm sure there's going to be several other companies with similar devices that you can look into. So do your homework on that. Also make sure to balance wearable insights with clinical advice. Not just clinical advice, but your own personal subjective feelings of checking in with your own body. And finally, your personalized testing using your genetics, okay, as a basis, as the blueprint. Use this information to add context to wearables, information that wearables can't capture. Okay, it's a multimodal aspect. These are several different puzzle pieces that give you the information to help you optimize your life and your longevity. Because a lot of times, yeah, I don't have diabetes. I'm wearing the CGM, just for information so I can better my health for longevity. And knowing my genetics gives me that basis. Using different technologies help to better my life. But you can also check and test to see how well you are doing for your longevity. Am I aging biologically slower than my chronological age? And there's a test for that. We actually have our DNAging premium test, where you can see how well am I doing overall, and being more specific, going, hey, the DNA methylation patterns going on, in these particular organ systems, where do I need to tweak? This gives more information for you to hone in a personalized way on how you can optimize your health or shift yourself out of a diseased state. So, anything to add?
Not about that. I just have there are a couple of other questions in the chat that I
Mhm.
wanted to get to before we get to our Q&A, because we're gonna have to rock it fast. One was a question about smart scales, and
Mhm.
once again, use it for comparison, for yourself, because the way that they tend to work is by sending electrical pulses through to determine how much of your body is muscle versus fat, how much water, how much bone. If but It's mostly you comparing yourself to you, so that you know, am I what is my body composition? How is it changing over time? So the smart scales and things like withings and all of those can be useful for that, but just don't necessarily take their proportions of things as 100% accurate either. And there was somebody who said, I think we may have been talking about exercise at the time, that she wasn't able to find that in her report. There is an exercise section in your report. And if you're still having trouble, then go ahead and on the website, you can get a hold of someone and talk to us about how to find that information. I just didn't want you to think
It's in
that.
the hormone system. It's a sub report in the hormone system, and it's fitness. There's a fitness
Right.
one in
That's what
there.
it's called, fitness.
Yeah.
So it is in there, but if you're struggling to find it, reach out to someone on the team. And there was also a question about glasses. So my glasses aren't as fancy as Dr. Varden's. They do have some protection against the light from my screen, but hers are very fancy. So would you like to talk about your glasses for a minute, Dr.
Oh,
Varden?
yes. Absolutely. These are Viva Rays. And we actually have a partnership affiliation with Viva Rays. Rudy Nassif, the CFO or CEO and one of the founders of Viva Rays, he's actually been on a few of the podcasts. I've had the honor of interviewing him. And we talk about how light frequencies can affect the body when we're talking about blue lights, in front of the computer. Here it is evening, the sun has gone down here in the Northeast, and I am being bombarded by these screens of blue light, and I have to have lights on me so I'm not all dark, so people can see me on this webinar. And that's a lot of light energy, and that can make my mitochondria tired. That can also not allow my body to have the melatonin that I need to be able to go to sleep in a couple few hours. So what I do is I wear these to help protect and block the blue lights, or the majority of the blue lights, so that way it also helps with eye strain, because otherwise I'd be like, I'm getting headaches, and which I have before. And it's wonderful. Again, devices or tools and technology that help us to be healthier. And then we use the trackables and wearables to see how are we doing with that, because it does affect my sleep. When, if I forget them and I end up where I'm on, watching a movie late, and I, left them in the car or something, or, I don't have them, I do notice it affects my sleep. So, different things, definitely good to use. So let's dive into the question and answers, because I see some great questions in here. All right. So our first question is from Elaine, and she is asking, she said, she's also interested in what we think about the energy that is in the hybrid and electric cars.
She then later said that it's off topic and to disregard.
Oh, I didn't see that one. Oh, thank you for that. Okay. All right, so let's go to Lori. So she's asking, well, actually, it's not really a question, but she's mentions about Beamer, Healy, Pillow app. Are you familiar with those?
I've used a Beamer, and it was very interesting because it could really, so you're laying on it, but then there's a wand part, and it actually could tell where I had stuff going on. It was, so that was, I was like, it is magic. But it's supposed to be great for recovery and somehow simulate exercise at the same time, but also recovery.
Mhm.
I don't know that much about the science of it. It's on my list of things to research, but it felt really nice, and I did feel better afterward. So some people really swear by them.
Yeah, I do know. Well, I've used a Beamer before, and it actually stands, because it's BEMER. It stands for Bioelectromagnetic Energy Regulation, and it really is a device that uses PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, and it's. I know that its claim, I should say, is to improve microcirculation in muscles and small blood vessels, enhance like oxygen delivery, nutrient delivery, waste removal, you know, really benefiting the cells, the tissues, and obviously would help with recovery, with detoxification, etc. And it is cleared in some jurisdiction as an FDA device. So I'm not sure which ones, but definitely something to look into if you are interested in using some of these. We have no affiliation or anything, but these are things to look at when you are trying to decide between a device, or, is this real, or is it just BS? Look to see, are they FDA approved as a medical device? Because that's a pretty good indicator that it's gone through rigorous, um, you know, research and vetting. So because it's not easy to get FDA approval on that. All right, next question. Okay, so Jack is saying, we'd love to hear our views on the Muse headband, which is used for meditation and tracks your brain waves and heart rate. Um, I know about Muse, but I've never used it. Have you?
No, I haven't, but I did look at it, because, was advertised to because I'm someone who likes gadgets. So, I yeah, so I don't know that but I didn't look too deeply into it. But if it's tracking your brain waves and heart rate, I don't know how that's used in the meditation process or if it's to show you that if you meditate, your brain waves and heart rate change. I'm not entirely sure that much about it. So
So sorry, yeah, I mean, I wish I were like a Consumer Reports. It's like,
I know, right? I'm gonna, I'm
that
gonna put it on my list of
would.
things to look up.
So, our next question is from Susan, and she's asking, which wearables can you wear in an infrared sauna? So, I suspect that you're probably asking about maybe, uh, like Oura rings or sleep trackers that you actually or uh, good heavens, um, watches, the smart watches or something. Um, yeah, that is a great question. I would say that, um, well, anything that would have a lithium ion battery, the heat and moisture, which obviously saunas would have, but I don't know with the
I
infrared.
think Whoop. I'm not sure about Aura, but I think Whoop you can wear in the sauna. Let me just quickly check.
Now I know,
You can wear a Whoop strap in a sauna, but avoid temperatures above 140. So you're probably more looking at an infrared, not a more traditional sauna that might get hotter than that. And let me just
right,
look up Aura.
yeah, because I don't think Aura recommends
I don't I
for
think
sauna
it says
use.
you can, but be cautious and keep your sessions short, that its operational range is only up to 125, and that exposure to temperatures above 140 can damage the battery. So,
So really, I think in this respect, um, do your research. If you're not sure, contact the company, ask them directly, see what their warranties are, because honestly, if they say, oh yeah, no problem, and then it kind of crops the bed and then it's not working, well, then you can turn around and go, wait a minute. So definitely find out what the warranties are, take a look at what kind of return policy they have. All right, next question. These are great, by the way. Thank you so much, everyone, for being so interactive. All right, so Debbie is asking, do we need to worry about EMFs with wearables? That's a great question.
one of the things that my husband really liked about the Aura Ring was that you can basically turn it on to airplane mode, and then it's collecting stuff, but it's not transmitting anything. And so it really reduces that. So that's one of the features that really drew him to that particular product. So I probably could have let you answer that one since you're currently wearing an Aura Ring, but I knew it. I knew that answer. So
Yeah, and actually that's something that I really like about the Aura Ring. And honestly, most wearables, Aura, Apple Watch, Whoop, all of these use what we call a BLE, a Bluetooth Low Energy, where the power output is only like maybe 1 to 10 milliwatts, which is much lower than even cell phones. And it seems like everybody's got a cell phone with them all the time, like attached to their limbs. So, really what they do is they usually send out short bursts rather than, of the data rather than the continuous high powered signals. So, you know, again, depends on the sensitivity of the person. How much uh, are you worried about that? Because obviously, again, we don't need to have your anxiety increased unnecessarily. So keep that in mind when you are making these decisions. And start asking the questions. And if you don't see it on their website, contact them. All right. Let's see. George has our next question, and he is asking, how would you go about clearing stress out of your system? Well, that is a very big question. There's there's so many ways. I mean, we've spoken about several of them. You know, if we are talking about devices, using devices that helps to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, that vagal tone. Okay. And I mean, there are actually devices that specifically do that, vagal tone activators um, with the Apollo. Okay. That helps to calm the nervous system. So, really, what it is, it's a matter of allowing the cardiovascular system, the nervous system, central nervous system to just slow down. And a lot of that you can do even without a device, just by doing some deep breathing, some grounding, taking just a pause and quieting yourself. But devices are always nice and useful. I mean, things like heart math, where you can clip and actually do some breath work and then see how well your heart coherence and right breathing are coming together to be able to focus. So there are a lot of different things, but it really depends on where your stress is coming from, why you're having that stress, and to really personalize that, the best thing to do, have your DNA done so you can get some insights on your particular mood and behavior, the way your brain functions, but even working with someone, working with one of our incredibly talented practitioners to find out why you're having the stress, and actually personalizing some of the techniques to be able to deal with that. Thank you very much for asking. And our last question, I should say, Cynthia. And we've seen her. Thank you for coming back to our webinar. And she says, is asking thoughts on Pulsetto. She said she loves hers.
And I think that works directly on the vagus nerve from what I recall about it. And so that's exactly the type of thing that Dr. Varden was just talking about. So I've never used one, but there are a lot of different ones that work on the vagus nerve specifically. And one thing that I will say about it is that I think I don't know about Pulsetto specifically, but I've heard that some people need the vagus nerve stimulated in one way, and some need it treated in a different way. And so just knowing that about yourself and knowing who to ask if you don't know would probably be a recommendation that I would have. So.
Well, I want to say thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tracy, for your information, your brilliance, the stories that you have shared, even the personal ones. Those always are very meaningful for your navigation with wearables. And I want to thank every one of you for coming here and joining us today. We hope you are walking away with some great information on ways on how to start discerning the hype in wearables and how you can navigate that field and get the ones that work best for you and that are science backed. So until the next time, we appreciate you. We thank you. Thank you to our team, Vanny, Katie, and even the voice of God. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we wish you a very wonderful evening.